All right, good morning. I have 11 o'clock. This is Jeff here at the National Weather Service office in Wakefield. I'll be going through the briefing here for today and really going through the rest of this weekend. Kind of typical spring-like weather, in store with temperatures going up and down. Also going to be recording this briefing and putting it out there on YouTube. So we'll just kind of get right on into it here and kind of talk about what's going on. Again, very typical kind of spring-like weather. I'll go ahead and kind of step through the weather maps here. It would be a little bit bigger if I put them here. So, this afternoon, we do have a front well to our north, just south of the Great Lakes, and it actually is going to be sparking off some severe weather to our north. And in fact, I can go ahead and show you now that the Storm Prediction Center does actually have an enhanced risk of severe weather up here just south of the Great Lakes. And so that's associated with that front that's up there. And it's going to slowly be dropping south. But kind of just jumping ahead a little bit, as far as our area, the system is going to weaken, and we're not expecting any severe weather down here, but maybe some thunderstorms later on tomorrow. And so we're going to be talking a little bit more about that. But for today, they do have that significant, a decent severe weather risk to our north. Mainly going to be wind and hail. In fact, the hail is probably going to be one of the biggest concerns up to the north. Tornado threat is a bit lower, but then you see the wind threat up there, and then you see the hail threat up there to our north. So not coming down into our neck of the woods, but it is that time of year, and so the front up there going to be causing maybe them some issues. So that's the front that we see up there now. By this evening, it will be starting to make a push, and kind of where they have that risk of severe weather, just to our north. See that front slowly pushing to the south. But for us, we have high pressure offshore. Notice the lines are kind of tight here over the Carolinas and Virginia. So going to be a decent little south to southwest wind. So the breeze is going to pick up a little bit today, maybe a little bit gusty, but it's going to be warm because we're pulling in that warm air from the deep south. As we get into overnight tonight, the front's still kind of slowly making its way across Pennsylvania, starting to get into West Virginia. By Friday morning, the front should be getting somewhere into northern Virginia and maybe about western Virginia. And one thing you'll notice with it is that a lot of the darker green, the showers, and maybe even some thunderstorms are really mainly behind the front, not so much ahead of the front. So ahead of the front, there could be a few little widely scattered showers, but most of the activity here in the green that you see is behind the front. And that's going to be for tomorrow morning. And then by tomorrow evening, that front is pushed all the way down into the Carolinas, starting to get towards Albemarle Sound. And as we may be getting a bit of rain behind this front tomorrow evening. So rain's going to be just ahead of it along, and then a bigger area of rain maybe behind that front. And we'll show that here in a little while. And then by Saturday, the front's well offshore. High pressure is building in from the west. You do see these tight lines again right across the Commonwealth and parts of Maryland and North Carolina. So going to be a decent little north breeze there, I'd say, late Friday night and especially Saturday morning. Going to be a bit breezy, but the high pressure does build in Saturday afternoon, and the winds should be decreasing. And by Sunday, that high pressure is right overhead. So Sunday's going to be a really nice day. And so Saturday, just going to be a little bit breezy and a bit cooler. I'm going into next week. Again, the high pressure starts to slide off the coast, and we see another cold front maybe starting to try to push its way, at least to our north here on Tuesday. Maybe it starts to let's show it kind of stalling out to the north. So we'll see how that goes, but that's not until later next week. So we talked about just real quickly the breezy conditions for today, and so it's just going to be a little bit gusty at times. Nothing going to be too extreme. Just going to be some south winds here. Gusting anywhere from, I'd say, maybe 20, maybe even some 30-mile-per-hour gusts here. So nothing going to be too bad, but going to be just a little bit of south wind, but warm. What you do notice here is you get this kind of a sharp wind shift here. You look at Friday 6 a.m. The wind arrows are still out of the southwest. But then by about 6 p.m., between noon and 6 p.m. Friday, notice we go from kind of a southwest wind, we start seeing north winds showing up. So depending on where you are, that cold front's going to sneak through either, I'd say, late morning to early afternoon in some areas, and then closer to the going from north to south. So areas more across, southern Virginia and northeast North Carolina might take a little bit later for that front to come through. But you definitely see this wind shift occurring here. But it's still breezy. Notice it is a little bit breezy tomorrow, gusting maybe 20, 25 mile per hour. And then behind that front, you notice Saturday morning, still pretty breezy, and it's all a north wind. So that's that cooler air filtering down. So that north wind, again, still gusting maybe to 20, 30 mile per hour Saturday morning. But the winds do decrease Saturday afternoon. You see a little bit of a breeze here at noon on Saturday, but by 6 p.m., you can tell that wind's really starting to die off quite a bit, so that high pressure building in. So just a little bit breezy for really today, Friday, and I'd say Saturday morning, and then things start to settle down a little bit. And again, that's the wind ahead of the front and really kind of right behind that front as that cool air comes into the region. Now, we did talk about the risk of severe weather. There's no risk of severe weather, but just a risk of thunderstorms. And so that's really fixed on tomorrow. We do have that risk of storms. I just realized I lost my window where I had that open, so I'm going to open up another one so I can kind of time those storms through here for you. Let me just pull it up real quick. Apologize for that. I had the window open, and when I went to go pull it over, it actually closed the window on me, so I did not anticipate that. Let's see here. We'll just use this. So this is going to be a simulation of the HRRR, and it's doing a pretty good job. Take it with a grain of salt, but it definitely is capturing the storms up here to the north. You can kind of see the storms developing later to the day to the north, and that's where they have that risk of severe weather to our north. Let me go back to the previous model so I can go a little bit further in time. So for us for tomorrow, I mean, notice here's that front coming through. This is about midnight or so, still way to the north coming across Pennsylvania. And you'll notice the activity almost seems like it kind of dissipates there a little bit across Pennsylvania, a little bit of a gap forms, but then you kind of move it ahead in time. And again, it seems like it kind of weakens here a little bit Friday morning as it's starting to push into Northern Virginia, just some widely scattered showers. So this is right around 10 a.m. Friday morning. But as it continues to push south, you will start to see some more development, kind of redeveloping here. And this is getting kind of late in the day. So, this is getting to about, I'd say 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock tomorrow evening. You're starting to see kind of that, you start to see that redevelopment. Let's go to 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Right there. So you're seeing some of that redevelopment of the showers and maybe even a few embedded thunderstorms here extending from Maryland, down across central Virginia and even western Virginia, and some shower activity ahead of the front. But the main front is kind of right in that leading edge of that precipitation. That's where the main front is, and a lot of the precipitation is actually falling behind the front. And so that's 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, kind of pushing into about 6 o'clock tomorrow evening. System can kind of continue to push south and may not really get into Hampton Roads. It starts to get into Hampton Roads maybe by about, let's say 5 or 6, but this is 8 o'clock tomorrow evening and it's still trying to push across the area. So, it might take a good bit of tomorrow night to actually get a lot of this shower and maybe even a few rumbles of thunder, offshore. Could see a little bit of teeny hail. We're not talking about big hail, but if you get a thunderstorm back there that pops up and it's a decent little thunderstorm, you might see some pea-sized hail or something like that tomorrow afternoon or evening. But it does take a while. And again, I'll kind of step through this again because this is in the morning, not a whole lot going on. This is about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And then by the time you get to about between 2 and 4, things do start to kind of increase in coverage. Nothing severe, just more showers and a few thunderstorms. It just takes a while. This is about 6 p.m. And again, by even 8 p.m., it's still taking its time getting across the area. So that's what we're looking at there on Friday. Again, no risk of severe weather, just maybe a few thunderstorms around basically as that front pushes through and maybe even right behind the front. And of course, Saturday, we're not expecting any storms whatsoever. Kind of again showing you the timing of the precip. As far as the amount of precipitation, some folks might get a good ½ inch out of this. You did notice it kind of took a little while for it to kind of push through. It kind of does drag across the area. In fact, right now we kind of have this little dark green area that says it could be a ½ inch or more, and that may actually cover a bigger area. We'll see. But it looks like everybody will see at least some rain. I'd say 1/4 to a ½ inch. A few places, with it taking a while for this stuff to get through, might see a ½ inch to an inch. You'll see how that goes. And you see that timing for most places is really in the afternoon. I mean, some places like Cambridge, Maryland, up towards Louisa, further to the north, up towards Ocean City, that chance of rain does, start to pick up after about 9 a.m. But for most of us, notice it takes us almost between noon and 3 before you see those chances of rain really starting to jump up. And even at midnight, a lot of the area is still seeing some pretty good chances of rain. We talked about how it's going to take some time to get this thing through here and offshore. But by the time we get into basically daybreak hours on Saturday, it's over. It's pushed offshore. Chance of precipitation is really coming down, pretty quickly. In fact, even after midnight by 3 a.m., the chance of rainfall really is starting to fall off. So basically going to be more like an afternoon and I'd say evening into parts of tomorrow night kind of a rain event for us, where our friends up north might see it just a little bit sooner in the morning. The further north you go, that rain may be moving in just a hair earlier. One thing I do want to show before I move on, kind of looking at the longer range, this is pretty neat. This is the forecast temperatures here that we're looking at, and this is actually sitting up for 1 p.m. Friday, and so it's really kind of showing you the temperature difference between the north and the south. Let me turn off sampling here. So you kind of see here, from 64 north at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you're talking about temperatures maybe in the 50s, maybe even in low 50s by the time you get to Northern Virginia. But then when you get south of 64, you're looking at temperatures, upper 70s, maybe even skirting the 80, especially Northeast North Carolina. So that shows you kind of the stark contrast there tomorrow afternoon at 1 o'clock. Where that front's probably going to be. And the most of the rain, again, kind of along and north of the front. And when you kind of push through the afternoon, you do see it slowly starting that cold air trying to push its way south by about 3 o'clock. But Northeast North Carolina, it might take a while for temperatures to drop there, but you do see the cold air kind of coming down the bay. And I'll back it up here for our friends here up in Maryland to the north. You do notice up north it never really warms up a whole lot up over Maryland Eastern Shore, and especially Fredericksburg North. You really don't see that warm up because the front's getting through there by about 9 a.m. And then here by about noon, now you're seeing the warm up south of the front, but it's kind of keeping temperatures quite a bit cooler north of it. So going to be a really big difference in temperatures tomorrow. Again, I'll just kind of go back here to 1 o'clock in the afternoon, showing you that stark contrast. So it gives you an idea of how sharp the front is. It's moving kind of slow. And by the time it gets to North Carolina, I mean, you're talking maybe 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening. It gets down into there. Maybe it gets into Hampton Roads by about 4 o'clock or so, with temperatures at north wind coming right down the bay, knocking those temperatures down. But even out here towards Carr Lake, it's still kind of warm. So again, it's just going to take a while to get that front through tomorrow. But it's going to be much cooler once it does. You'll see that cold air really surges in. There's some temperatures there coming, really cold temperatures kind of coming in, at least seasonally cold by the time you get into Saturday morning, 7 a.m. So that cold air is coming for everybody behind that front. It's just going to be a big difference on Friday as far as what folks are experiencing. And so this is just kind of talking about the rainfall for tomorrow. But then on the right-hand side, we are dry. After this, from Saturday morning all the way through Tuesday, really looks like most areas going to stay pretty dry. High pressure is kind of staying offshore. And whatever fronts look like or they're going to form next week, look like they're going to stall to our north right now. And that's why those look like we're going to be mainly dry, but you're seeing a lot of rainfall to our north for next week, early next week. Because right now it looks like those fronts are just going to get stuck up there. So kind of breaking out the whole week, you definitely see these warm temperatures today and even tomorrow. We'll see how this goes. We may have to tweak some of these temperatures and realize too, like some of these warmer temperatures, like in Louisa and you get down here towards Salisbury, these 65-degree readings, a lot of these high temperatures are going to be occurring in the morning. So these are 24-hour high temperatures. So I mean, these temperatures could be occurring like at 1 a.m., 2 a.m. in the morning before that front actually gets through. So be careful with that. It could be a little bit misleading because some of these high temperatures are going to actually be right after midnight. And then when that front comes through in the morning, temperatures are going to be falling. And so in fact, I'd say everybody pretty much, I'd say from I-64 north, including Richmond, is going to see falling temperatures through the afternoon. Again, it's going to take a little bit longer to get down to Hampton Roads and basically the North Carolina-Virginia border and down into North Carolina. That's why you're starting to see some of these almost 80-degree readings the further south you go, because it's just going to take a while to get that front through. But then Saturday, quite cool. Temperatures in the 40s and 50s. That does linger into Sunday a little bit here. But then you see these rebounding temperatures next week as the cold front stays to the north. And so we get another big warm-up getting in store for next week. And again, you see these low temperatures that are going to be occurring basically Saturday, we'll say Saturday night and then also again on Sunday. So you kind of see a good little cold shot there, but then warming up back behind it. As far as just looking ahead, we kind of gave you a little prelude there to what the 8 to 14 day outlook looks like. We're going to be warm next week, above normal temperatures as we get into middle of next week, and it looks like that warm temperature spell is going to extend even beyond that. Pretty good signal that we're going to see above normal temperatures really across the entire deep south and mid-Atlantic, really going out for almost the next 2 weeks on average. There may be a a day where a weak front sneaks through and cools things off a little bit here and there. But on average, it does look like we have a pretty strong signal for above normal temperatures. Precipitation wise, probably going to be around near normal. I mean, the fronts are hanging up to the north, so we're not going to be getting into a wet pattern by any means. And so again, things may dry out quite a bit over the course of the next, after we get the rain event tomorrow. Tomorrow night, we may actually see a pretty good spell where things dry out quite a bit. And so we're going to have to kind of keep an eye on the fire season here, because if you get several days with warm temperatures and it starts to get breezy, those fuel moistures dry out really fast. They'll almost dry out within a day or two. And then we can start to get into some fire danger. So we're going to have to watch out for that with above normal temperatures. And if the precipitation does kind of shut off for us a little bit, could increase that fire danger later next week and maybe even the week beyond if we stay dry. So just something to be aware of. We'll keep an eye on it and see how things go as far as moisture over the next, I'd say, 7 to 14 days. Shifting gears onto the marine side, basically the orange kind of represents where we may be getting into some small craft advisory conditions. So for today, with that south wind picking up, maybe we see some gusts of 20 knots here, maybe even 25 knots on the bay here with that southwest wind. So that's what you're seeing there, maybe even on the coastal waters. But as you get into tomorrow, right ahead and along that front, Friday into Friday night, you're definitely going to see maybe a little bit more wind, especially as that front pushes through. In fact, you even notice a little bit of red showing up. And even here on Saturday morning, you see a little pockets of red where we could see some brief gale conditions with the front, especially right behind the front as the cold air surges in. I'll show you that here in a second. And then for Sunday, it looks like the winds do decrease. The high pressure is right overhead, so we don't have as much of a marine threat. And really even not too much of one on Monday, just maybe a little bit more of a breeze, but not a whole lot of a marine threat there for Monday. So this is the probabilities of experiencing different winds out there on the water. So 25 knots is small craft advisory conditions. So pretty much a slam dunk there that's going to happen. Really high probability. All the models are suggesting that, both ahead of the front and then behind the front. You do see some low probability of gale conditions here in the middle slide, kind of getting here in the mouth of the bay. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised to see the low probability even running up the bay here a little bit. And that's really going to be right with the front. We do kind of expect that right when that front comes through, we probably are going to see some gusts about 34, maybe even 38 knots or so. Probably only going to last maybe an hour or two. 3 hours at the most. So we don't have gale warnings up because it's just going to be a brief period there. But it is starting to show up in the probabilities here, at least a low probability from the mouth of the bay out into the coastal waters that we could see some gales. And like I said, I would expect with the later model runs, we might start to see more of this yellow with the low probability of gales even creeping into the bay. So we'll just kind of keep an eye on that. And so this is, again, showing you some of the peak winds we're expecting here between now and Sunday morning. So, again, we're getting right at that 33 knot threshold there. So we're, some pretty good winds. Probably going to see a little bit higher wind right with the front. And you can kind of see ahead of it here with the south winds ahead of the front. And that front really comes through pretty quickly Friday between 9 and noon, kind of rushes down the bay. And by Friday afternoon, everybody's got a north wind pretty good. I'm about maybe gusting up to about 20 knots. And then the winds may even pick up a little bit more, gusting to maybe 25 to 30 knots. Again, we talked about early Saturday morning, we kind of get that surge of cool air. So early Saturday morning could be a pretty good breeze out there, gusting up to about 30 knots in most of the areas there. And the winds do decrease for Saturday. And kind of getting ahead into Sunday here, we talked about that high pressure moving in, and you really see those winds decreasing late Saturday night into Sunday morning. But ahead of the front, we got some pretty good south winds ahead of the front. That front comes through Friday afternoon, Friday evening. Got some pretty good, wind, small craft advisory conditions behind the front. Maybe even getting into a period here of 30 knot gusts or so, up to maybe 34 late Friday night, early Saturday morning. And then the winds really decrease Saturday night into Sunday. So, kind of a mixed weekend in store. Saturday, probably not a great boating day. Sunday, with the winds decreasing overnight, does look like Sunday is going to be a much better day out there with much calmer conditions, especially with things settling down by about 9, 10 o'clock on Saturday night. Should set up for a nice day there on Sunday. As far as your wave heights, with the south wind, and eventually the north wind coming through, well, we'll see waves, today probably around 2 to 3 feet, 2 feet on the bay. But then right ahead of that front tomorrow, when that front comes through, the waves are going to jump up to about 4 feet and about 5 to 6 feet for the most part on the coastal waters. As conditions get a little bit breezy. Again, you see the best period here where we see most of our 4 to 5 foot waves really getting in behind that front. I'd say late Friday night, early Saturday morning is when those waves really start to build up a little bit. We'll have some waves build up with the south wind, but the highest waves are occurring when that front comes through. When that cold air surges in, those waves are going to be getting up there about 5-6 feet. Notice how Sunday with the dying wind, the wave height and seas really do come down pretty good there for Sunday. And again, just kind of some of the occasional wave heights out there on the right. Behind the front, we might see some waves getting up to 7 feet, maybe even some 8-footers further to the south with that north wind surging down. But on average, it's going to be mostly 5 to 6 feet, occasionally 7 to 8, maybe even if you push offshore, maybe some 9-footers getting out there if you're heading for too far out offshore. And that's mainly going to be for, I'd say, late Friday night and especially early Saturday morning when we realize some of these higher seas. So that's all we've got for today. We'll have our next email briefing coming out on Monday, and our next live briefing will also be on Monday at 11 a.m.